Greetings. Good morning. It is Sunday, the 23rd of April. I am Pastor Carrie, serving the fine people of Sunrise Church and the Pueblo West community. This is my morning brief where I try to expand a little bit on some of the background to the scripture that is the focus for the sermon. And today I was running a little late, so I'm going to just kind of pause for a moment and make sure that some folks can get on who like to get on live. When you do come on, if you would like to leave a message in the chat, let me know that you're here. And something that I've kind of failed to say in the past is if there are any of these morning briefs that just really strike you or just touch you and you want to share them on Facebook, I would invite you to do so or share it with someone who you think it might touch as well. So again, Pastor Carrie West, and it's a gorgeous morning. It's always a glorious morning when we wake up and know that God is with us. Okay, so we are in week 2 of a sermon series called Rising Up. So we have celebrated the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. We know that Jesus lives forevermore. And what I've been wanting to do in these 3 weeks is for us to kind of grasp and believe and own and kind of make our own that this resurrection power of God that raised Jesus from the dead is also available to us, and it is working in us. It is working around us when we have eyes to see and ears to hear and hearts that are open, right? So we are doing this sermon series called Rising Up, how we also are risen with Christ into new life as followers of Jesus the Christ. So week 2, here we are. So we're using the resurrection appearances stories from the Gospel of John to kind of help us understand this resurrection power. Okay, with that said, today we are moving into John chapter 21. It's the last chapter of the book. And what I will start and what I'll kind of talk about in the sermon is that chapter 21 is actually most likely not authored by the gospel writer John, who wrote chapters what we call 1 through 20. 21 seems to be an addition. And it doesn't seem to be an addition by the gospel writer himself because the use of the Greek language is so much different than the rest of it. Now, when we translate to English, we don't catch that because it's translated in a way that we understand. So it seems consistent, but the actual way in which the Greek was used in its original form is much different, which points to that it was a different person. Now, it could have been definitely part of John's oral tradition, the stories and the ways that he talked about Jesus in his community. These stories are likely ones that he told, but he didn't write them in the gospel. And so that leads us to kind of ask some questions about that. And that's kind of where we'll go with in the sermon for a short moment. All right. Well, what I want to dig into and just give a little bit more information about is how the story that we're going to hear today, which is verses 1 through 14 in chapter 21, how they really weave in several other stories that have been told in John already. So we have kind of this hearkening back to other miracle stories. Okay, so even in Jesus's resurrection self, before Jesus ascends into the heavens, Jesus is still performing miracles. Yes, his resurrection was a miracle, of course. That was God's power, God's doing. But Jesus continues to do those miracles. So, number one, we get this kind of look at that there are still miracles around us. Secondly, these miracles really are about a certain particular type of miracle. These aren't healing miracles. These are abundance miracles. And so what we're going to hear in the gospel story today from chapter 21 of John is a hearkening back to the wedding of Cana, when Jesus turned water into wine. That's a story that we don't get in any other gospel, only John's gospel. Then there's also a hearkening back to the feeding the 5,000 with fish and bread, because that's what we're going to hear, that Jesus gives his disciples fish and bread. And so we hear that story in this resurrection appearance story in 21. And then we're also going to hear, and this is somewhat subtle, but and this is the one I want to talk about. But so in the story that we hear today, Jesus tells that these disciples go fishing. They don't catch anything. Jesus says, throw your net on the other side. They catch so much fish, they cannot hardly, hold the net and haul it in. And once they get to shore, Jesus says, bring me some of the fish that you just caught. And so Peter runs to haul in the fish. That's what our scripture says, or what our English translation says, haul it in. The Greek word is actually also used when say draw, to draw in. And so what we hear is how Jesus invites us to draw others in. We know that Peter and his brother Andrew and James and John, these were fishermen. And when Jesus called them to follow him in the very beginning, he said, come and I will make you fishers of men. And often we hear of the Greek word for drawing in, that Jesus would draw in the crowds. Jesus would draw in his disciples into the understanding of what he was saying and doing. And so now what we see in this is that Peter is drawing folks, drawing the masses, this abundance of fish. He's drawing it in to Jesus, which is that call that we all have, right? To draw others in, to share the gospel, to help others know who Jesus is. We have been drawn in by people in the past, right? That's how we've become followers. Obviously, God's Spirit, Jesus is a big part of that. But we've learned our faith from other people. We've heard the good news from others. We have been drawn into our faith because of the work of others. And so here in this story, we really get this miracle story of drawing in masses. And Peter is really at the heart of this. Now, there's a lot more I can say about the significance of chapter 21, and especially on the role of Peter in the whole chapter. So, but we're going to hit that next week, by the way. So I think that's good for now. I think the other thing I would just say is, again, as always, we want to be really careful when we're reading scripture in our 21st century experience and trying to kind of project that experience into that first century time of Jesus and post Jesus's death and resurrection. There's just so much that we would consider unhealthy or not appropriate, or and I'm thinking about like how we use other people's names, or we try to gain credit for ourselves. So this person, whoever this person was who added chapter 21, like this is very common practice in the first century. Oops. Sorry, I don't know what just happened to my computer. Hopefully I was still on. I think I am. Okay, anyway. So that's just the word of caution about 21st century. It's like a squirrel just ran across my screen and I didn't know how to handle it. So I hope to see you in church this morning. We do worship at 10 a.m. In person and also live streaming. I invite you to go to our website for the live stream, Sunrise, Sunrise Pueblo.org. It's the best way to watch. And I hope the rest of your day is the very best of your day. And we'll look